You know what, by the way? And this is out there to you, fantasy DFS community. First of all, you're a bunch of nerds. Second of all,
Those are my friends, Andy.
well, I got friends. Hey, I have friends who are nerds. Doesn't mean I can't say, yo, you're a nerd.
I'm just
But
messing with you.
regardless, I don't like that thing that you do where you casually upload your first place. You go, not a bad weekend, eh? Yeah, I know you've seen it, Gary. They do it every week. Just, that's the nerd equivalent of an Instagram model showing you her ass and then saying, and quoting Gandhi in the comments section. No, say, I won $100,000. I'm happier than all of you right now, and I'm going to do some interesting things with it, all of which I can't share with you. And that's all I have to say about that.
If and when I get my first big win this season, Andy, I will tweet those exact words. Okay.
Let's go on to week 4.
Yep.
So Gary, when looking at the whole slate, I always start the bidding with the high scores. If I'm going to give you the chance, like Price is Right style, why don't you open the bidding this time? Is there a game that jumps out to you? First one that you'd like to talk about or break down?
I mean, I can't help it. I can't help just keep going back to these Kansas City environments. And now they're 1-2, seemingly desperate, going into a Philadelphia team that looks just as, looks horrendous. Both defenses, I think, are very bad. And, the fact that it's actually in Philly, I think makes this game even more appealing from an overall game stack perspective. I like both sides of it. So, that's what I'm looking at. I think what we got 54.5 there, something like that. And
we have 54.5,
7.5 point spread. Casey's probably desperate at the 1-2, but if they can get up big, then there's no quarterback, maybe no quarterback in the league I like more in garbage time than Jalen Hurts from a fantasy perspective.
Yeah.
So, I really like both sides of this game. There are pieces I like on both sides. KC can't stop a leak. Philly, we just saw what Dallas did to them, and we just saw what Dalton Schultz just did to them. You know what I mean? So
plus, not to mention, I always try to put on that regular guy hat, the generic hat from Liz. And the regular guy hat is telling me, it speaks to me like a magic 8-ball. It does. And it says, people are scared of the Chiefs now.
Yeah.
People are scared. Somebody spent all that money on Tyreek Hill. He won't play him again. He did a Hills Mahomes stack, and now he's up. And the regular guys are now, they go, I saw Josh Allen do good, and he's playing Houston. And then they run over there. That's what the regular guy hat is telling me this week.
Yep.
Kind of like the genie in Pee Wee Herman, if anybody knows what that is. You know what? I'm just going to eat that one because nobody does. But that's what I'm hearing right now. That on the road, right? That one's at Philadelphia?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, so at Philadelphia, people would rather say, you know what? Because I think the Eagles, they earned themselves somewhat of a reputation for decent defense these first couple of weeks.
Not really this past week, though. They're also incredibly undisciplined.
Yeah.
You know?
So you might get people shying away in terms of the percentages. So it's even another reason to back your support for Mahomes.
But on that point, let's say the Eagles defense is okay if Casey's coming in. The only thing I don't like about what I'm about to say is that Philly's on the short week. And I think Casey's even more desperate than Philly because Kansas City cannot start the season 1-3, right?
Oh, they signed Josh Gordon. That's when you know you're good. What are they sign Martavius Bryant next? They'll sign anyone.
Exactly. So, I think that when you take into account the price difference between Mahomes at 8,100 and Jalen Hurts at 6,900, I think I like the Hurts side better from a DFS tournament perspective this week. And then especially when you take ownership into account. Early again, we're recording Wednesday afternoon. This is very much subject to change. Jalen Hurts only looking at a 6.4% ownership right now. Mahomes is sitting around 10%. So and then you obviously have a lot more lineup flexibility when you go with that Hurts side, and you can still get a Kelsey or Hill in there if you want to go that route. So, that's kind of the way I'm looking at this, similar to the way I liked Herbert better than Mahomes last week when you take into account the price difference and the shitty Kansas City defense. I think that's going to be one of my favorite quarterbacks.
The only difference is one can really, when you watch some of his throws, you ask yourself, how am I going to get any points at the end of this game? That's how it felt with Hurts by halftime yesterday.
I played some Showdown this past Monday night, which I don't know why. I don't know why I do that to myself. That game is nearly impossible. But I played some Showdown on Monday night, and I had like 70% Jalen Hurts captain, thinking it was going to go that way. They, first of all, they're so undisciplined. They commit a ridiculous amount of penalties. The league is straight up rigging the season for Dallas right now, just from a penalty perspective. I know it sounds like a joke, but go look at the numbers. And
they've lost too many years. They've lost too many years.
They're like tripling the next team in penalty yards right now. But regardless, it's he still got to his floor just because in the fourth quarter they finally loosened up. So like he looked terrible for most of the game. But he's got the Dallas defense is actually way better than people think. So he's got a softer matchup here at home against KC. But he's not good. I don't think he's a very good real life quarterback.
Let's see if he's right and he's able to take a shit and without looking at it and move on to the next one. I don't know. I think he peaked at that shit, and I think he might look like shit next week.
From a fantasy perspective, I think he might look like shit again, but I think he'll put up the numbers. That's really all.
How are you going to know who to choose, though? Rager, Smith, both tight ends had decent weeks. I don't know. I'll leave that up to you. You're the one who's going to see. You have an advantage there because you get to play. You're the that rich girl from Willy Wonka. I forget her name. Is it Veronica? Veruca. Yes. You get to play you get to buy as many Wonka bars as you want. But old Charlie over here, I got 3.
Well, let's think about this, right? Real quick before we move on. A Hurts ceiling game includes what, right? So our Hurts ceiling game probably includes 300 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, but it also definitely includes 70 plus rushing yards and a rushing touchdown, right?
Yeah,
so to me, the stack portion of a Hurts lineup is not nearly as important as the stack portion of a Mahomes lineup. So I'm cool with skinny stacks with Smith or Rager or Goddard. If you want, I'm probably not much double stacking. It's kind of what I was talking about last week, or maybe I did it 2 weeks ago. I'm even good, and maybe I like this even better with a Hurts skinny stack and a double run back on the Chiefs side, or even. And I won't do this much, but it's kind of like the way I treat Lamar. Like maybe I sprinkle in a couple of percent of not naked, but just a run back. It's like Hurts. Say he spreads it around and he has 100 rushing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns or whatever. And you might just want Hurts and Kelsey, which is a weird construction, but it gets contrarian. So from a tournament perspective, there's little things you could do like that.
All right. So what about let's talk about non-contrarian. And if I had to take a guess, after watching him last week and then having Houston on the agenda. If you don't mind, give me an early percentage of a Diggs Josh Allen stack against Houston, because Diggs probably is 7,600, still not too expensive, and people they're not going to lose faith in him over a performance like that. It's not like he went 1 catch or anything like that.
Totally. So we're looking at 10 and 11% respectively between Diggs or for Josh Allen, and then 11%.
That's got to go up.
I'd imagine it's going to go up. But here's the thing that scares. Once people think, so this is the thing, people overthink. And I'm going to go back to the week that I won last year. It was a very similar environment. I think the Chiefs were favored by like 18 points at home against, or wherever it was. I don't remember where it was, against the Jets. And people were thinking, well, if they're favored by that much, there's no way that Mahomes and Kelsey and Hill can have these ceiling games because they're going to get up so big and then they're just going to run out the ball. But the Bills are in a similar position here. They're favored by 16 at home against the worst team in the league in Houston. But that's not how the Bills are wired. They're not wired where they get up big and then just run the ball out. Their offense flows through the pass game. So to me, yes, does the game script scare you a little bit in the second half, just like it would anyone else in these types of environments? Sure, maybe a little bit. But to me, that's still a plenty good stack, because if they are going to cover that spread, it's the same thing I thought about last year. If they are going to win by 20 points, they have to get those 30 plus points somewhere. And there's a good chance that it will come through those Josh Allen stacks once again. They're at home in a good matchup. I would expect him to have a very high floor once again.
All right, the next game. So the Bills have the highest implied total. Chiefs number 2. We just talked about them. The third would be the Rams, who, there's no reason to think that they shouldn't now, because the McVay Stafford thing, it does seem to be gelling the way they'd hoped. They have the necessary amount of weapons, and in my opinion, as long as Darrell Henderson is not there, I feel like it tips the scale even slightly more into the passing, mindset, just because it's not like Sony Michel's going to be catching a lot of passes. So, right. So they're playing the Arizona Cardinals. So 1 week ago, we're talking about Kyler Murray being, the next Patrick Mahomes. The sky's the limit. So you have that team playing the Rams, who are now this offensive semi-juggernaut. Got to be some pieces in here that people are going to be trying to implement into their lineups, including this guy.
Yeah, it's hard not to love this game. The better question is, are you full on game stacking this? Because you can make arguments on both sides against that. Or are you just using a lot of the secondary pieces, kind of like what I ended up doing with the Rams and Bucks last week? I think the answer is probably that you want a little bit of both quarterbacks. I think Kyler's going to come much lower owned, being a tougher matchup in against the Rams, looking more human last week. But hey, the same way that maybe the Cardinals played down to their competition last week and kind of squeaked by the Jaguars. I mean, the final score may tell you otherwise, but I think if you watch that game, that was the case. I think we could see them play up in a division game. That is really important for both teams. So, I think that I like the Stafford side a lot because the Arizona pass defense is really weak, and I equally from a ownership perspective and leverage perspective, I like the Arizona side a lot. So, I'll be definitely picking around this entire game. How about you?
I am going to definitely have pieces in this game. Just some random thoughts. Chase Edmonds is having secretly a good and productive year, but they've had some. Last week is a typical James Conner game, right? You're playing a team like the Jaguars. There's not a lot of. It's not one of those high intensity games where you need a versatile running back with the quarterback has a good relation. It's the perfect game to get Conner his carries. I think he had 2 touchdowns or something like that. But if you look week to week, Edmonds is actually doing a lot with his touches, and his touch count went up from week 1 to week 2. And in a game against the Jaguars, it allowed Conner to get more touches. And somebody like Edmonds could be a sneaky good play in a game like this. A game that is likely to fit the skill set of Chase Edmonds opposed to ramming James Conner up the middle.
Yeah.
So you could be looking at a game where somebody like him, and I'm also the kind of guy where if I tap the well and nothing comes out, I'm tapping that damn thing till something's coming out. So me and Robert Wood's going to be having another tussle this weekend because he owes me. That's how I look at it. I have personal gripes against some of these players who I believe aren't bums. If a bum screws me, I go, what did you just do that for? But when a non-bum screws me, I show up at his door the next week like a collections agent saying, hey, you remember what you owe me? And that's going to be me come this Sunday.
That's totally fair. I'll say this about Edmonds. I agree with you. I think he's developed a really nice floor for this season. I question the ceiling because we really have never seen it out of him before. But that doesn't mean I won't be using him. I will be using him, but very heavily correlated. So I will not be going any single Chase Edmonds at all this week. He needs to be with other pieces of this game. Yes. There's no doubt about it. There's almost a 0% chance he hits a ceiling. Where I like plenty of other running backs just to kind of go this week in his range.
True.
There's no way I'm letting him go by himself. But somebody that I do love, and for the exact same argument you just made, we got Ramsey on Hopkins. I think it's going to be a lot of underneath. That's kind of maybe the way to beat it. And we saw this beat the Rams, and we saw this 2 weeks ago out of this guy. But I love Rondale Moore this week because now we're a week separated from him being in the perfect lineup, or 2 weeks out now. He's all the way back down in that mid 4K range. I think the ownership will be contained, and it'll be kind of those split targets underneath between him and Edmonds. It's just kind of whichever one might take it to the house. But Rondale is someone that I think we can kind of see that same game script from 2 weeks ago when he really had that huge game. So that's someone that I'm really high on this week.
How about any players that maybe are new to the mix who really are jumping out as a good value, whether it's this week or somebody you maybe have an early sniff on, like, oh, wow, you can kind of see this coming. And the reason I bring this up is because I kind of see this with Odell Beckham. I mean, I know they were slow to use him, but at least it was one of those situations where he didn't have to get eased into the flow. He saw, I believe, 8 or 10 targets. He had a productive day. They are so limited with options right now, and he is so far clear, cut and dry best receiver they have.
Yep.
So I believe they're playing the Vikings this week, who do not scare you whatsoever. Look at every single wide receiver playing against the Vikings this year. Somebody like Beckham, he's going to find his way into my lineups for sure.
Yeah, I like Beckham a lot, and he looked pretty healthy last week. The only thing is without Landry and without much other threats in that passing game, will the Vikings just game plan to shut him down? I don't know if they have the personnel to do that necessarily, but that's my only fear there. I really do also like some other pieces. I mean, this is another high over-under game. We should be talking about it. So, I mean, I think it's hard to not like Jefferson again. It looks like he's really coming into a groove there. Good on you for having a lot of him last week. I was a little bit scared there just because of how beatable Seattle was on the ground, and they kind of looked decent against the pass up until last week. So, I good on you. I think he's going to continue to shine here now. But I really like Nick Chubb also. It's going to be similar to the Derrick Henry that I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about in our lineups or whatever. But just matchup wise, they are really bad on the ground, Minnesota, and I just don't see that game ever getting to a place one way or the other where he's totally out of the game script. Like, I don't see Cleveland getting down big time where it's all Kareem Hunt, and I don't ever see them getting up so much where either team ever getting up so much where they don't even need to have him out on the field for the reps. So I think we know he has the floor every week. It's about picking the ceiling games for Chubb, and I think this game
and also Chubb hasn't had a monster game yet, and plus Kareem Hunt had a monster game last week. Guarantee you, if I had a Men's Warehouse guarantee, it would probably be that Chubb is going to be low owned this week.
Yeah,
I know that's a different kind of guarantee.
No, you're right. You're right. The early stuff is coming through for that way. Only 3% right now for tournaments. So yeah, that's someone that I don't even have him in any of the lineups that I've started to build out to maybe play against you, but I will be playing plenty of Nick Chubb because he's 7K. I think people are a little scared of the price. The matchup is good though, and you gotta pick and choose those ceiling spots with mixed with leverage, and this one adds up for me.
So that's one I would really say star, folks. That's one that can separate in tournaments. It could definitely separate you from the pack. Another guy who might be able to separate you from the pack simply because he hasn't had that breakout game. He's had a ton of goal line work, ton of red zone work, but it just hasn't materialized. And that's Jonathan Taylor. So by virtue of screwing a lot of people, I can't imagine, even if this is a good matchup, he's playing against the Dolphins, who just ceded 100 total yards to a full bum.
Yeah.
To a full bum. And if this man sees this video, I'm sorry. I bet you do. You're a great guy. I don't doubt it. I bet you cover the bill when you go on a date and you don't complain about it later. But, you just went for 100 yards. Yeah, I'm not even going to say who it is, just so at least there's a little bit of doubt in this person's mind. Is he really talking about me?
Can I say it?
Go ahead, say it.
You're talking about Peyton's freaking barber?
Peyton Barber. Peyton, go to your local barber, Brutus the Barber, Peyton Barber. Yeah, he went for over 100 total yards against the Dolphins last week.
Yeah.
Nice to know that they paid Kenyon Drake to do absolutely nothing. But you got Taylor going down there. 2 weeks ago, I was a little nervous because he didn't even have 50% of the snaps because they all of a sudden they reintroduced Marlon Mack. But if you're going to believe the reports, they deactivated Mack last week because they're trying to trade him. And for somebody like me, that's huge because you don't see them going so far down against the Dolphins that they're going to have to play a pass-heavy game where Hines is always in the backfield. Hines is going to get his work, but this is a perfect get-right game for Jonathan Taylor. I'm talking about like 2 touchdowns. So
I couldn't agree with you more. Last week, I was all over Nyheim Hines. So the industry was kind of trying to do the same thing we're doing right now, the week ahead thing on Taylor. But when you look at that game environment, against Tennessee, when I thought I'd be fully healthy with A.J. Brown and Julio Jones, Hines made a ton of sense, especially because he was coming in at like 1% ownership, and we know he has the ceiling. And I ended up going 20x on the field. Really worked out. He had 19 points at whatever he was, 4K or something. So last week was a Hines week for me, and I still liked Taylor, but I loved Hines. This week it's the other way around. Love Taylor, like Hines. I like both of them though. Miami I think overachieves as far as kind of staying in these games. Wentz is still banged up, and Brissett isn't bad for game script. Like he's not, you know what I mean? Like he keeps, especially it's in Miami. So I think you can make arguments for both these guys, but I really do like both those running backs a lot. And I will be playing a lot of Taylor, especially while he's still in that low 6K range. It almost has the sniff of like the Barkley pay last week, which didn't ultimately smash the way we both thought it would, but he was fine. He had 21 point something points, I think Taylor's got a similar floor this week.